Hi, welcome back to my channel. I today want to continue into the look into possible suspects around the Gilgo case and possibly read out a bit more about Murder Inc. afterwards. First, I want to read James Burke indictment when he got federally charged. I'm going to see what else I can find on them. And then I'm going to read the Bitrolffs preliminary statements. These are court documents into the background of the Gilgo case. We found out how the Gilgo 4 were treated, how he treated possible other girls, but he used different ammo and different method. And I, for a while now, have been thinking the possibility of I'll keep an unbiased mind when I come to these claims, because I don't want to say things that I'm not qualified to say. I haven't got the evidence. I haven't got everything in front of me. But where my unsolved cases and background into those, where it would be interesting into looking into James Burke is how he stopped the FBI formally looking into the Gilgo case, and why did he stop it? We've got to ask ourselves that question. Was he part of this group that I feel that was there? I will apologise for the way I speak on my channel. I am quite jazzy with my sentences. I jump to one sentence to the next, and I apologise for that. I've formally been diagnosed with ADHD now, so I can possibly say it's probably that a lot. Stick with me. I am trying my best to explain myself better for your benefit, as well as the channels, because I have done over 64 videos on LISC and I want to do more content as well. So I'm going to pull up the James Burke. Okay. No. Okay, let's start with the Bitrolffs one. Let's not mess around. Okay. This was done. Does it have a date? No. It does possibly at the bottom. Okay, on January 23rd of 2025. Okay. The context of the pages, the table of authorities involved, the preliminary statements, the statements of relevant facts, arguments, and point one, and so on and so on. It's 14 pages long. I'm going to try and be as descriptive as I can. So let's get started. Preliminary statement. Due to discovery by cybergenetics of a male profile found on Colleen's vaginal swab, stretch pants and male dungarees found at her crime scene, as well as discovery of 2 additional male profiles found on items at her crime scene, all of which were previously determined to be inconclusive by the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. Mr. Bitrolffs moves, pursuant to the law for an order vacating the judgment of conviction entered against him on the ground that there exists a reasonable probability that the verdict would have been more favourable to him if this information was known to the jury at the time. Okay, so the jury didn't know this when when he was convicted formally. Mr. Bitrolffs further moves an order of the court requiring the people to conduct a search of these newly discovered profiles in the CODIS and any local DNA database, to order the mitochondrial DNA testing of the hairs found on the bodies of Colleen and Rita, and compare all DNA profiles to the profile of Rex Human. In the alternative, he seeks an evidentiary hearing on this motion. Statements of relevant facts. Background. In 2017, John Bitrolffs was convicted of killing two women, Rita Tangeretti and Colleen McMahon. Both women were workers in Suffolk County at the time of their passing. Rita's body was found in the wooded area on November 2nd of 1993. She had been strangled and bludgeoned to death. Colleen's body was also found in a wooded area. Okay. Strangled as well is another one of his MOs. Colleen's body was also found in a wooded area, January 1994, and like Rita, had been bludgeoned and strangled to death. Right? The discovery of their bodies led to hundreds of tips regarding possible suspects. These tips revealed an unsavory characters who both women associated with pimps, pagan gang members, listen to this, corrupt police officers, and abusive ex-partners, to name a few, despite the many tips. No arrests was made until 2014, when the DNA found on both women was found to be partially matched John Bitrolffs' brother. This partial match led investigators to John Bitrolffs. Was later... Oh, sorry, you've not seen this tab. You're not seeing this tab, are you? Okay, I'm going to give you this tab now. I get carried away. Okay. This partial match led investigators to John Bitrolffs. It was later determined that John's DNA matched some samples taken from the woman's bodies. He was arrested and ultimately convicted in their murders. Yet the only physical evidence that connected Mr. Bitrolffs to these women was his DNA being found on the vaginal and anal swabs of Rita Tangeretti and anal of Colleen McNamee, and a partial identification of his DNA in a fingernail scraping of Rita's left hand only. This is damning, very damning evidence. But what is the suggestion here? Although both crime scenes showed that the women suffered violent deaths, no other physical evidence showed that Mr. Bitrolffs was present at the actual crime scene. Mr. Bitrolffs' fingerprints were not showed that Mr. Bitrolffs was present at the crime scene. Mr. Bitrolffs' fingerprints were not found on or near the women, and no other trace evidence was found on the woman or at the crime scenes that belonged to Mr. Bitrolffs. While the people stated that this presence of Mr. Bitrolffs' DNA in the fingernail scrapings of Miss Tangretti's left hand showed that the violent struggle took place, the people's witness at the trial testified that he did not see any blood or skin in those fingernail scrapings. Okay, so you've got one scientist saying that he didn't get any samples of anything like of the sort. Okay, and then you got the police saying something else. And this is the thing with Suffolk County, okay? Suffolk County is in Long Island. I just stumbled across it through the human case, but I don't like to say all the victims. I don't feel there's an element of group activity, pagan gangs and things of this nature going on here. And then you get an element of, revenge, killings and things of that nature. I understand what he means, but when your evidence is that damning, what is your point? What's making you determine that, like, the people's theory of the physical fight between John and Rita? Additionally, no witnesses claimed to see Bitrolffs with either women before their deaths, and none of the hundreds of tips mentioned him as a possible suspect. It's like setting up someone with the DNA. I mean, I think about like Human's case, like, is it from the ruse? Is it cut onto them? Is it, how is the DNA there? I can't explain it via text, and I'm not, like on my comments and things of that nature. When I explain this to people, I feel that people misunderstand what I'm trying to say. Okay, I do feel it has to have a separate organisation involved in these type of cases, because what if you have a person who's quite vindictive? There's a lot of vindictive people in power. This conclusive DNA was found on Colleen's sample. Oh, sorry, hang on. More importantly, an unknown male DNA was found on Colleen's body and on items found at her crime scene. However, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory deemed this unknown male DNA as inconclusive, meaning it could not retrieve a profile and could not compare it to any known suspects. This inconclusive DNA was found on Colleen and stretch pants and these male dungarees found at her crime scene. I mean, I've seen pictures with human in male dungarees. The male dungarees, because he's a carpenter as well, they wear stuff like that for the pockets. The male dungarees with the name Michael M. in the waistband were found near Colleen's body and had semen and Colleen's blood on them. At one point, into Michael Murphy was premature was prematurely destroyed by Suffolk County Police Department. Also, the initials, they found out who the initials perhaps belonged to. And prematurely destroyed the DNA. Also questioned during the investigation were Murphy's brothers, who included James, Michael, and William. James Murphy worked at the tender trap for money, the investigation file, where Colleen was a topless dancer. Oh, wow. He believed that Tony the Wig or John Miller murdered Colleen. Although the jury ultimately found Bitrolffs guilty for the women's deaths, it was not an easy or quick verdict. The jury deliberated for 7 days and returned to the courtroom on 3 occasions to announce that they were at deadlock. Wow. While it is now unknown what caused the deadlock, a logical assumption is that while the evidence may have proved that intercourse occurred, it did not prove murder. And that's true, you know. I mean, there was a possibility she had a different name and he didn't know who she was, and things of that nature. I'm just going to be a second. I'm just at my office, so I've got to lock up when I leave. The murder of Sandra Costello in 1993. Shortly after the discovery of Tangredi, the body of Costello was found in a wooded area in North Sea. It's a very good possibility that Rita Tagredi is a human victim, by the sounds of it. Costello, who was also a worker, I didn't know that, had been strangled and beaten. The district police attorney claimed that Bitrolffs was a suspect in the Costello's death due to similarities in the way that the body of Rita and Colleen and Sandra were found. Specifically, all three women were with their legs apart, hands over their head, with one shoe missing. And that's the signature of also Gilgo Case, apparently. I'm not sure. Not sure where John Ray got that from. I don't know. Maybe from this case, District Attorney Office claimed that Bitrolffs was a suspect in the Costello's death due to similarities in the way the bodies of Rita were found. Okay, yeah, we just read that out, Emma. Okay. Colleen and Sandra were found with their shirts above their heads. District Attorney referred to the way the bodies were displayed as the killer's signature and calling card, really. Although the District Attorney's Office believed that Bitrolffs was responsible for Sandra's death, they never charged him with her murder. In June of 2024, Rex was charged with Sandra's death after being identified through hairs found on her body. He was also charged with the murder of 6 other girls, sex workers. Let's say sex workers because they are. The reason why they found the DNA in the first place was due to sex, It doesn't mean, as he rightly says, it means murder, Cybergenetics analyst, Suffolk County Crime Laboratory analysed the DNA evidence collected from Rita and Colleen using the threshold-based method involving human interpretation, known as combined probability inclusion. CPI is an old method of DNA analysis. That most crime laboratories have stopped using due to its limitations. Specifically, many studies have found that the CPI methodology disregards a large portion of DNA data present in a sample, and by doing so ignores DNA data that is required to accurately include or exclude a victim. Sounds a bit like how they planted it on, because they didn't have anybody's DNA for Koberger, because the sample got contaminated, right? They only had that one little thing, and you know what, that sheath doesn't say anything really. I mean, it is a knife sheath though, so I'm saying it says it's one element of the I just feel like there's 2 people in that case as well, because of the crime scene. You couldn't inflict that many wounds unless there was 2 at least. You know, I'm just being practical. Maybe that's just my mind. Um, in fact, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office has used true alkali and realised data on 28 criminal cases. So he's requesting a different type of method be used on these girls' samples, and the DNA analysis. It's you know, it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt here, hasn't it? You know, the argument point one. There exists a reasonable probability that had the jury been informed of the findings by cybergenetics, that the same unknown male is found on Colleen and on items found at her crime scene, Mr. Bitrolffs would have been acquitted. The persuasiveness of DNA is so great that, as one commentator noted, when DNA evidence is introduced against an accused at trial, the prosecutor's case can take on an aura of invincibility. It certainly does. You know, now I look at things a lot differently. It's funny how I'm back reading stuff again, but doing it on YouTube. Given the power of DNA evidence, criminal procedure law provides that at any time after the entry of a judgment, the court in which it was entered may, upon motion of the defendant, vacate such judgment upon the ground that ground one, forensic DNA testing of evidence performed since the entry of a judgment. One, in a case of defendant convicted after a guilty plea, the court has determined that the defendant has demonstrated a substantial probability that the defendant was actually innocent of the offence of which he or she was convicted. Or two, in the case of the defendant convicted after a trial, the court has determined that there exists a reasonable probability that the verdict would have been more favourable to the defendant. While a defendant who has conducted post-conviction DNA testing under the subsection needs to show more than a mere possibility that the verdict would have been more favourable to him, he does not have to establish the virtual certainty that there would have been no conviction without the DNA evidence. Here, the defence theory at trial was that while Bitrolffs may have had intercourse with Rita and Colleen, who were both workers at the time, he did not murder them. The physical evidence admitted at trial supported this theory, since Bitrolffs' genetic material only existed in places consistent with intercourse. the people were able to undetermine this theory by relying on the fact that Bitrolffs was the only individual whose DNA appeared on both women. What are the chances of that? Very, very bad coincidence. A coincidence that suggested that was too great to assume it occurred by intercourse alone, despite the lack of physical evidence placing Bitrolffs at the crime scenes. Relying solely on this coincidence, the people minimized the unknown male DNA. Yeah, that's how they did it in the Gilgo case too. Uh, what else? But this is speaking objectively. I'm speaking subjectively when I say that. That's my opinion, based on what evidence we have here. We have his nail scrapings under her nails. You know what I mean? We have DNA inside of her. You know, anally. So it just seems suspect. And I don't know about Rita though. I just don't feel that he was part of that alone. I don't feel any of this has been alone. I feel there is some kind of group sacrifice group, fun activity to do. I don't know. I really don't know what I know that Human had grounds. He had acres. You know, he could tuck woman up there, threw her out in the field, practice the shooting. You know, these people are not thinking like me and you. You know, they're on another level. He used to go to Alaska. You know, who's gonna catch a girl going missing there? You know. Okay. People minimise the unknown male DNA found on Colleen's body and at her crime scene by assuming it ended up there as a result of her occupation. And but then it contradicts what you're saying too. So, but then again, he had blood on those dungarees. So, if there's blood on those dungarees, why? Yeah, I see. I mean, the weird thing is that he's a joiner or carpenter, and there's human and architect. You know, so it's like the connection is business. You know, Mr. Bitrolffs at the crime scenes, relying solely on this coincidence, the people minimised. Oh, we read that bit. Sorry. And downplayed its significance. Now, with the analysis done by cybergenetics, the other male DNA cannot be overlooked, particularly genetic material left behind from unknown male A. The DNA thread that ties all together, as set forth in the report. DNA from unknown male A is found in a sperm component of Colleen's swab, the sperm and the non-sperm components on Celine's pants, and the sperm and non-sperm components on male dungarees found at the crime scene. The new evidence is highly significant because it not only shows that unknown male A had an intercourse with Colleen, but that he was also present where her body was discovered, since his sperm was found on her pants, exactly, and hanging on the bush, on the male dungarees, which also had Colleen's blood on them, and were found on short distance from her body. Finding DNA evidence was material and exculpatory because it supports identifying someone other than the defendants as the attacker. I see also the stating a affirmation as reference. Again, unknown male A is the only male to appear on one of the women's bodies and on one of the items of the evidence found at the crime scene. In addition to the unknown male A being present on all samples at Colleen's crime scene, the discovery of two additional male profiles, unknown male B and C. Cybergenetics was able to provide yet another exclusionary results for Mr. Bitrolffs. Specifically, excluded Mr. Bitrolffs from the sperm and non-sperm portions of the DNA samples taken within the dungarees. This exclusion was not supported by the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory and not presented at Mr. Bitrolffs' trial. Mr. Bitrolffs was previously excluded as the contributor to the male DNA found on Colleen's swab and pants, while the cybergenetics reports do not contain new evidence regarding Rita. The physical evidence collected at Rita's crime scene was more limited than at the Colleen crime scene. In fact, several pieces of evidence found at her crime scene were not swabbed for DNA, including a pair of jeans, 2 beer containers, oh my God, and a shoe. However, since the police alleged that one person killed both women, exploratory DNA evidence for one victim is exculpatory for both victims. True. And it's ridiculous the evidence wasn't swabbed. Why? It does seem like Burke again popping up. If this DNA evidence has been presented at trial, if it is not unreasonable to conclude that the jury may have acquitted Mr. Bitrolffs, especially since they came back deadlocked on 3 occasions, even without this powerful DNA evidence, holding that there existed a reasonable probability that the verdict would have been different if the DNA evidence had been presented at trial, especially since 2 Allen charges were required by the jury rendered a verdict. The DNA evidence coupled with the indictment of Rex Human for the death of Costello, a murder that District Attorney always claimed to be connected to Rita and Colleen, raises too much doubt as to Mr. Bitrolffs' guilt to allow his conviction to stand. Justice requires that this court vacate Bitrolffs' conviction. Point 2. Pursuant to the CPL section 440.30, the hairs found at the crime scenes of Rita and Colleen must be sent for mitochondrial DNA testing, and the new DNA profiles obtained by cybergenetics by searched in CODIS and in all local